Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it. I heard when they said Florida, I heard one cheer. Is there someone from UF here? All right. You're already guaranteed to be successful, so congratulations. But thank you. I'm honored to be with you guys. I really am, actually. I know everybody says I'm honored to be here. I really am. This is a unique opportunity to deliver a message that there are few audiences in American politics today that I believe would be more receptive to and for whom this message is most appropriate. By the way, I'm an adjunct professor at a university in Florida. I teach a course primarily online. Most people get an A in the course because they're all voters, so, but it's a political science course. It's called Easy Politics or something, but somebody asked what the course name was. So I can tell you, the reason why we started doing it online, it was difficult to get people there by 8:30 in the morning, so I'm impressed you're here, but you probably were all staying here. Some of you probably never even went back to your room last night. You just came straight over, so that's fine. Either way, we'll take it. And you're part of a long tradition being here today. It's a tradition that began really as a simple, steadfast belief in American principles, and at that time, it was amidst the aggression of international communism abroad and the chaos of liberalism and socialism at home. And while some of the conditions we find ourselves in today are different from those, the principles that are behind this organization and its purpose are not. And I am happy to see that so many of you in this new generation are here to defend them. Because you are indeed the foot soldiers of a movement to recover and to restore America. America, the country that President Reagan called the last best hope of man on earth, and to preserve a nation as a shining city on a hill for freedom. And that principle is as important today as it has ever been. It's a critical time to be what you are, both young and conservative. An essential piece of what it means to be conservative means to have value for the eternal truths in a time when what truth means often seems to be slipping from our grasp. What are the truths? The truth of the dignity of work, of the essential importance of the family, of strong and thriving communities, of love for your country. All of these truths are now too often forgotten, or often actively replaced by ideologies that act to dissolve the bonds that are supposed to tie us together as one people and one nation. Truth is now replaced by outrage, an outrage cycle of political and cultural tribalism that marks our fellow citizens not by our shared identity as Americans, but as places within an endless labyrinth of subcategories and consumption patterns. These days, you can be anything you want if you buy the right things, speak the right political language, and broadcast yourself on social media in the right ways. Now, I could try to describe to you all the ways people identify themselves these days, but you'd probably be better off just reading a list of the student groups at any of your colleges. And while the identity politics on college campuses is too often blamed as the cause of our political divides instead of a symptom, it's actually indicative of our challenges. The heart and the soul of our nation is in our young people. This is cliche, but it is true, and it will always be true. It was Americans of your age that fought and won battles from Bunker Hill and Yorktown to the beaches of Normandy and Okinawa. It was Americans your age that powered the factories that churned out the first automobile, an airplane, and smartphone. And it is Americans your age that will get married and start families and bring the next generation into being, and thus be responsible for carrying out our national experiment in Republican government for yet another generation. A healthy America is marked by the spirit of our youth. But that spirit, I believe, sadly, is often misdirected in all kinds of ways today, and it is hurting our national and our social cohesion. A poll by Gallup on the 4th of July of this year found that only 33%, only 1 out of 3 Americans ages 18 to 29 said that they were extremely proud to be an American. That figure is down from 55% just 5 years ago. And for the first time since Gallup began polling this question, a majority of Americans were not extremely proud to be Americans. The share of young adults still living with their parents is the highest it's been in more than 75 years. And by the way, it's not because they've come back home after college to help run the family farm. In the 1950s, fewer than 5% of children in this country were born outside of wedlock. Today, over 4 out of 10 children are born outside of wedlock, and the number continues to rise. From 1967 to 2017, the percent of Americans aged 30 to 34 that have never married rose from 5% to 35%. Last year, only 26% of adults ages 18 to 34 were married. That was down from 40% in 1990. Progressive attacks on the family and dignified work have created a world where these bedrock institutions of social life have each been degraded, and where even the most basic form of identity, the one thing we all share in common as a foundation, American citizenship, is denigrated as something to be ashamed of instead of a source of pride. In the prime of their lives, many of the young people in our country are adrift. And if it is not you who will drive the revival of American pride and strength, then no one will drive the revival of American power and pride and strength. What we need now is a new American courage. And there is no better generation to lead this movement than yours. In fact, there is no generation that can but yours. It is the same courage that Reagan had when he went to Berlin to say those famous words to Mr. Gorbachev to tear down this wall. And there were people in his administration at that time who thought that that language was too abrasive and too antagonistic. But Reagan had the courage to say it because he had the courage to stand up for the American ideal on the international stage. It is the same courage that Reagan had when he took his message to the American people. Back then, after suffering defeats in the years past, the Republicans thought the way to go was to soften their tone or to revert to the corporatist Republican ideal of years past. But instead of seating the party of the working man, instead of seating the working man to the party of FDR and Truman, he brought conservatism in plain terms to what he called the man and woman in the factories, the farmer, the cop on the beat. And today, that courage will require standing behind what we know is right and what we know is true. Not because it's popular, but because it needs to be said as truth. It will require you to stand for the dignity of work in a time when when the very basis of it is under attack by those who believe that we should substitute a hard day's work with a government check. It would mean swimming against the tide of elite opinion that says a universal basic income is just as good as income, and it is not income. It is nothing but a bribe to the people left behind by the global economy. There are many young people in this country today, and sadly around the world, that think that socialism is somehow this rebellious thing that we should be getting into. They think that courage is expressed by calling for bigger and bolder government programs, as if that wasn't old and tired. It's one of the oldest political lines in the book. Let me be clear. I live in a community, and members of my own family, who fled a country where they had a universal basic income. It's called Cuba. It's a disaster. And like it, many thousands of people are now starving in Venezuela right now. And they technically have something like Medicare for all. And throughout history, millions of people bearing the image of our Creator have been slaughtered by the authoritarian power justified by these socialist and communist ideas. So I encourage you to always speak truth. Democratic socialism is not rebellious. It's just fashionable. In today's society, the real rebellion, the rebellion you are called to, is to support the principles of the American founding. It's having the courage to build a life for yourself and for your family, to work hard and to live on the fruits of your labor. This, amazingly, this is courage in today's world. Now, it would be unfair to say that a lack of courage to stand up for these principles is limited only to the political left. Courage will also require you to stand against the tide of some mainstream conservative economists who say that buying artificially cheap goods from China made through stolen American intellectual property is a substitute for the productivity of our own workers. Those who say that global trade that makes it cheaper to buy something at Walmart is useless if it destroys the jobs that pay enough to buy it. Standing up means supporting our country in a trade war with China that we cannot afford to back down from. It is to say to Red China, Mr. Xi Jinping, tear down these tariffs. And have real leverage, by the way, to force their hand, like Reagan did the Soviets. Courage will require standing up for the family against a progressive ideology that seeks to destroy and replace it with a world where there are just two spheres, the individual and the government. Those who believe these things, they have the hubris to think that after thousands of years of human history, our society is the first to arrive at the right position on gender ideology and eradicating the family. To stand up against that means to fight for life and bravely state the simple truth that traditional families are the tried and true best way to raise children. I hope it will also mean fighting for new and innovative ideas that apply the principles of conservatism to the challenges of the 21st century, like our successful effort to expand the child tax credit, or allowing new parents to use their Social Security benefits for paid family leave if their employer does not provide it. Because parents should be able to use their own money to help start and raise a family. It will require standing up for our national community. That means we have to be the ones to recognize our shared citizenship with each other and with other Americans and work out our differences as brothers and sisters of one nation under God. My very good friend, Ambassador Nikki Haley, a couple of weeks ago said, maybe last week, spoke to a group, but just a little bit younger than most of you. And she talked about owning the libs and how that should not be our goal. And she's right. There's nothing about owning the libs in the Pledge of Allegiance. There's also nothing in the Pledge of Allegiance about triggering or microaggressions. There is no future for a healthy America where half the country is kicked to the curb while the other half reigns triumphant. We've already fought a war and struggled after that war over issues like that. President Trump was elected on the promise to make America great again. I believe we all share that goal. But to make America great again, we have to forge a national consensus again. And that will be hard and very difficult work, but it has to happen. And it is work that will require the energy and intellect of people like you to win over the American people to the fundamental truths that we hold dear. Finally, it will require standing up for our country. Our national history is the story of striving to achieve the ideals of the Declaration of Independence to secure the fruits of liberty for all Americans. National pride does not mean ignoring our flaws. It means recognizing them as the necessary condition of a great struggle to realize the lofty goals of our founding. In conclusion, let me say that just a cursory review of our nation's history reveals an interesting and recurring pattern, and that is a concern about our national decline. It seems that at least once in every generation, Americans are gripped by the fear that our best days are somehow behind us. And I would say that we once again find ourselves in such a moment of doubt. This pervasive sense that at some point soon, some other nation will overtake us, or even worse, that America, as we know it, is about to come to an end. The future of our liberty and of our prosperity is not foreordained. It is not destined to just happen on its own. But it's also not destined to decline. Our tomorrow, your tomorrow, will largely be shaped by what we do and by what we fail to do. As we have always done, each side in our politics argues that if their opponents were to win the next election, America's best days are gone forever. And I'm not saying public policy and elections don't have consequences, they do. But I'm saying to you that our greatest challenge is not that we may do the wrong things or even elect the wrong people. Our greatest challenge and our greatest threat to our future is that, paralyzed by fear, we will fail to act at all. The Soviet dissident and Nobel Prize in Literature winner Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he once asked, "Must one point out that from ancient times a decline in courage has been considered the first symptom of the end?" I'm going to talk about the end. Those are powerful words. From ancient times, a decline in courage has been considered the first symptom of the end. Now, we are very fortunate to live in a nation and in a time when very few of us in the public square are called upon to demonstrate courage in the face of physical pain or death. But we will always need people and leaders willing to demonstrate moral courage to do what is right, even if we fear that popular opposition will subject us to discouragement, shame, scorn, and even personal loss. For without moral courage, we will not be able to take responsibility for ourselves, for our decisions, for our lives, and for our actions. Without moral courage, we will not be able to fight against an unacceptable status quo. Without moral courage, we will not be able to resist the passions of the mob. Without moral courage, we will not be able to stand up for the vulnerable and the powerless. Now, I do not always pass the test, but I'm not discouraged by this, because my faith has taught me that true courage is not natural. True courage is the gift of fortitude that comes from the Spirit of God. The fortitude to overcome fear and to do what is right and to do what is just. And I would submit to you that our nation is a story of a nation shaped by such fortitude. It was the fortitude of our founders to risk their lives, their fortunes, and honor in the defense of the belief that all men and women are created equal, because our rights come not from our government, but from our Creator. It was the fortitude of the abolitionists to call upon their fellow citizens to obey God's command from Leviticus, words inscribed on the very Liberty Bell that said, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." And our times once again require such fortitude and courage to do what is just by defending life, by restoring the dignity of work and promoting the equality of opportunity, to do what is right by opposing tyranny and supporting human rights, because God created all men and women in His image. We have the opportunity to author the greatest chapter in the amazing story of America. And no generation will write more pages in this new chapter than yours will. So even as we confront our many challenges, I also ask you to be excited about the opportunity to embrace the opportunities, for they are even greater than the challenges. And if you do this, then I truly believe with all my heart that the American miracle was going to live on for yet another generation more. And as you venture from here back out into the rest of your lives, I leave you with an encouragement and an ancient command to be strong and steadfast. Do not fear or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Thank you. God bless all of you. Thank you very much.